Anxious and avoidant partners. I think all of us have probably felt a little bit anxious or a little bit avoidant in a relationship before. But when you have an attachment style, when that's your normal way of bonding with somebody and how you act in a relationship, and you've got one person who's more anxious and one person who's more avoidant, this can lead to problems. I want to dissect a little bit of that here. So without getting too much into the details of attachment style, it's kind of the way that you feel about intimacy and how you feel about being close with somebody. And somebody who's more on the anxious side or the anxious preoccupied side, they usually want to be close to somebody all the time. They don't feel very secure by themselves. They want you around a little bit inappropriately. And then somebody who's more avoidant, they want to be in a relationship, but it makes them really uncomfortable. They don't want to be around you all the time. They want their independence a lot, and maybe a little bit too much. Again, it's basically about swinging a little bit too much to either side. Now, when you get into a relationship where one person is more anxious and one person is more avoidant, you get this dynamic that happens, and it's frustrating. I've been in this dynamic. Usually for me, I'm the more anxious person. I usually want in a relationship for somebody to be close to me all the time. But the dynamic is what you may have heard called the pursuer and the distancer dynamic, or people use different words for it, so you may have heard it referred to a different way. But the idea is kind of like that there's this chase going on in the relationship, and one person is always going after the other person. The person who's more anxious is always chasing after the person who's avoidant, and the person who's anxious, I can speak from experience, feels like they're never getting enough loved, they're not cared for, their partner is always running away, their partner doesn't want to be in the relationship. Like, that's what it feels like. But on the other side of that, the person who's avoidant always feels like the other person is trying to smother them. The other person is trying to take over their lives. The other person just doesn't respect them and won't give them their own space. And both sides are frustrated. It's not a good situation. It just feels like this endless cycle that just keeps going and going and going, and nobody's satisfied. So here's the thing. If you're already saying to yourself like, oh wow, I'm definitely that anxious person, or I'm definitely that avoidant person, the thing is, these attachment styles, they can change. You're not like permanently stuck the way that you are. There can be periods in your relationship where you start out anxious and then you move towards more avoidance. Or you could be something called fearful avoidant, which is kind of like a combination of the two of them. But you could also start out as avoidant and move towards anxious, and it can kind of like go back and forth where one person's chasing the other person and then something happens or something flips, and that person now is chasing the first person. So it's like this constant, sometimes people call it like a roller coaster. It's this exhausting process where, again, no one's feeling satisfied. I just looked at my notes and I wrote down, because I, again, am somebody who's usually more anxious in relationships, and I usually want somebody to be around me all the time. I have a hard time understanding people who are avoidant, and I just want to say to you, if you're anxious, like somebody who's avoidant, they feel like you're clinging to their leg all the time, no matter what they do. Like, they're getting your text messages during the day, and they're like, leave me alone. Like, I'm at work. I'm in the middle of something. I can't answer you every single second of every day. Like, you can take care of yourself. That's kind of what it feels like. And I know that may sound a little bit harsh, because you're used to thinking of love as like, well, love means you want to be around somebody all the time. And it's not that somebody who's avoidant doesn't want to be around you all the time. They just don't want it all the time. Like, they need their space. Like, anybody needs their space. You would probably get irritated if somebody was clinging to you as much as you want somebody to cling to you. At least you think you do. And on the flip side of that, for somebody who's avoidant, I know it might be a little hard to understand why somebody who's anxious would be so clingy and so into you, but you would probably feel like your partner was leaving you if your partner ever talked to you. I mean, let's face it, probably part of the reason why you're attracted to your partner is because they do all of this emotional work that you're not willing to do, and it makes it feel like a relationship. So both sides here have something to learn from each other. Alright, so I think you get the picture here, but what do we do about this? I mean, there is an attachment style called a secure attachment style, and ideally that's what we want to move towards, but if you're in the middle of a relationship right now and you just need something practical to do, one of the best things I think you can do here is to communicate. Let your partner know how you're feeling. I know for somebody who's avoidant, that might be a little bit harder because the anxious person's probably telling you all the time and you're like, shut up already. But for the avoidant person, you got to step up here and set some boundaries and let them know, if they send you a text message and you can answer it, just answer it. Just say like, I'm busy right now. And like the anxious person on the other side of that, when they say they're busy, understand that, like give them their space. I mean, what we're really talking about here is that both people have to go against what their feelings naturally tell them to do. The avoidant person has to communicate. You have to express yourself. You have to say, this is making me uncomfortable, even though that makes you uncomfortable to do that. And the anxious person, you need to step back a little bit. You need to understand that your partner needs their space. Like your constant attention is actually bothering them. So take a chill pill, step back, find something else to get involved in, distract yourself, maybe talk with a friend instead of your partner if you need to get stuff out. It's not that you have to stop expressing yourself completely. You just need to do it in a way that's not constantly on your partner. I know. I'm kind of like making this seem like it's a lot easier than it is. I know it's hard because we've been habituated. We've been doing these things as habits for a really long time. Again, these are the ways that we typically bond with people in relationships, so probably you've played this pattern out many times before in relationships, and it's going to be hard to change that. So both of you, while you're in this period of trying to change it, hopefully you're communicating about this. Avoidant people, like, I know that's uncomfortable, just maybe this is your first step. Have the conversation and then go from there and try to both be understanding of each other, that you're learning, that you're going to figure this out, you're going to mess up. The anxious person, the avoidant person's not going to answer you sometimes, or they're going to tell you that you're bothering them. Don't take it personally. Practice not taking it personally. The avoidant person, the anxious person, is probably still going to continue trying to be around you all the time. They're going to want to cuddle. They're going to want to spend all of their days and nights with you. It's okay. They're not going to take over your life. You are in a relationship with them. So I know it's hard. It was hard for me to change things. Sometimes there's underlying stuff going on. And this is where I would say, if it's something that you really struggle with, then definitely go in and see a couples therapist. They should know about this dynamic. It's like a pretty basic thing that goes on in relationships, and they should be able to help you with it. I'm sure every couples therapist has heard this story time and time again, and they have their own strategies and their own ways of working through it with you. If one therapist maybe isn't helping, maybe you're not jiving with them, go ahead and try another. But really, I think if you value this relationship, if you do love each other, even if you get on each other's nerves, no relationship's perfect. This dynamic, if it continues, eventually it will wear your relationship into the ground and it will wear away at you, and you're just going to hate each other and hate yourself, and I'd hate to see it end in a breakup if it doesn't have to. So it's worth going in to see a couples therapist, a good one. And I say that with caution because I've been to a bad one, so try a couple out. But it's worth it if you value your relationship and if you value yourself, really, because who wants all that stress? The goal is not to make these dynamics go away completely. The goal is not to have a perfect relationship. It's a little bit more like, instead of having a chase, having something more like a dance is a popular metaphor for it, where you kind of like lean and sway and work yourself around these issues day to day. It's not going to be perfect, but you're going to feel a lot less stressed and a lot more satisfied. So let me know, is this something that you've experienced in your relationships? How have you handled it? Did it work out? Did it not? Have you seen a couples therapist? Let me know all your feedback down below. I want to hear it.